everyone. I am Dr. Xinfang Xie. I am a research assistant professor at the University of Michigan Institute for Firearm Injury Prevention. My research focuses on applying resilience theory and multi-domain analysis to understand the disparities in firearm injury and chronic conditions resulting from racism and violence exposure. Most importantly, I also seek to identify behavioral, interpersonal, and community-level factors that can promote resilience among communities shouldering the unjust burden of violence and racism, and therefore inform preventive efforts. I'm really excited today to introduce the series of Friday Best Facts for the ISTSS, which is in collaboration with the Institute for Firearm Injury Prevention. This series will be on firearm injury and firearm violence. We know that firearm-related injuries are a serious public health problem, especially in the United States. In 2020, for example, there were more than 45,000 firearm-related deaths in the United States. That's about 124 individuals dying from firearm-related injury every day. Some groups are disproportionately impacted by firearm injury than others. Men account for 86% of all victims of firearm death and 87% of non-fatal firearm injuries. The rates of firearm violence and injury also vary by age and race or ethnicity. We also know that firearms have become the leading cause of death for children and adolescents in the United States in recent years. That's surpassing the motor vehicle death and those caused by other injuries. Firearm homicide rates are highest among teens and young adults aged 15 and 34 years old, and among Black or African Americans and Hispanic or Latino populations. In contrast, firearm suicide rates are highest among adults 75 years and older, and among American Indian or Alaska Native and non-Hispanic white populations. We also know that structural, social, and economic inequities drive firearm injury and violence that impacts communities of color and those other marginalized communities. Structural inequities are policies, structural social structures, and norms set by the institutions in power that prevent individuals living in impacted communities of color and marginalized communities from gaining equal access to opportunities and resources. Structural inequities are caused by policies rooted in racism and discrimination that target these communities and create segregated and under-investigated neighborhoods. Hyper-segregated poor neighborhoods, for example, with underfunded public health services, poor housing, less economic opportunities, and limited healthcare, all contribute to and exacerbate the firearm injury disparities that we're seeing today. Firearm violence and injuries also increases the risk of adverse outcomes such as PTSD, depression, cancer, hypertension, substance use, and impaired cognitive functioning. The effects of firearm violence extend beyond the victims and their families. Firearm violence incidents, including those happens in homes, schools, houses of worship, workplaces, shopping areas, on the street, or at community events can affect the sense of safety and security of entire community and impact everyday decisions. Therefore, firearm violence requires evidence-based, multifaceted solutions that address the complex interplay between individual groups, communities, and larger societal factors that impact firearm violence and injury. My colleague and I have created informational resources for the public and communities, including an infographic on the disparities and impact of firearm violence and the fact sheets regarding trauma from school shootings and among children and adolescents, and identify some of the resources that we can use. We include what we know so far about the evidence-based strategies that can prevent firearm violence and injury and mitigate the disparities we're seeing right now. We also will be releasing a podcast at the end of the series that go into a greater detail about disparities in firearm injury and the relationship between racism, discrimination, and firearm injury. To learn more about the series and to access to all these resources, check out our Friday Facts page at ISTSS.org. And you could also check out our website at the University of Michigan Institute for Firearm Injury Prevention. We have the most updated research so far that and the resources we have gathered. We hope you tune into the series, and we thank you for listening.